A new setback for former President Donald Trump and the federal criminal investigation into his actions surrounding January 6th. Trump has lost an emergency attempt to block former Vice President Mike Pence from testifying about their direct communications. Trump has repeatedly tried and failed to block at least a dozen witnesses from testifying. CNN's Caitlin Polantz joins us now. Caitlin, Pence announced not long ago that he will be willing to testify. So what happens next?
Well, Sarah, Mike Pence could be going before that grand jury as soon as today because the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, the appeals court that issued this order last night, they basically told Trump that he's losing the whole ball game here. He may be able to continue on with appeals, trying and arguing executive privilege, but he's not going to be able to block Mike Pence from going into the grand jury. Pence is saying he's willing to testify. So now we're waiting and watching the court to see if he does show up, when he does show up, to give that unprecedented testimony. Sarah, this is no small thing. There have been many, many witnesses brought in by Special Counsel Jack Smith to testify to the grand jury in the January 6th investigation in the D.C. federal court. But Mike Pence is a vice president testifying against the president he served under, divulging conversations between just those two men, the two leaders of the country. Normally, they don't share those types of things, but it is a situation where a grand jury needs information. We don't know exactly what the courts are saying to say that Trump loses here and Mike Pence needs to testify at this stage, but it's very clear that when a grand jury needs this sort of information, the secrecy around the presidency falls away. And so Pence, when he goes to the grand jury, is very likely to be divulging under oath exactly what was said, what he can recall about the conversations Trump had with him when he was pressuring him after the election, the whole way up to the morning of January 6th, saying that he believed Mike Pence could block the outcome of the election. Pence, of course, was telling him no, that all is going to become part of this January 6th investigation. But Pence, of course, is just one in many, many people who have been forced to go in by the courts. Trump has lost 4 different appeals that he has tried to make, blocking different testimony, and Pence will ultimately be at least one of a dozen people that are forced to go in here, and not a small one at that. Sarah?
Yeah, we were looking at all those names. They're all insiders. They all have information that the grand jury is going to hear from. Thank you so much, Caitlin Polantz. We appreciate you live from Washington.
Let's move on to some other big legal stories, including Donald Trump losing another round in court. Yeah. And a judge saying Mike Pence not only should testify before the special counsel grand jury, but that Mike Pence should answer questions about direct conversations with the President of the United States. That's a huge deal.
It is a huge deal. Now, set aside that it's Mike Pence and Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, this is an incredibly simple legal matter, which is that as a vice president of the United States, the vice president is an officer of Congress. And some of the statements he makes or would be asked to make are going to be protected. You know, like if asked about his direct duties that he engaged in on January 6th. He doesn't have to talk about those. But private conversations with the president, conversations in which crimes may have been discussed or criminal behavior or potential evidence might have been discussed, of course he ought to talk about that. And there's really not much contest to that. I think we've gotten wrapped up in the fact that it's these two outsized political personalities, but no one should be surprised that Mike Pence is
we've talked many times in recent months about the idea that you need to prove Donald Trump's knowledge that he actually lost, his intent to defraud the government, to steal the election, essentially to defraud the government. So Pence obviously could be critical to that as someone so close to him.
Right. Number one, do they talk about the election, which is clearly in the bounds of what Pence could be asked about? Number two, Pence's knowledge that Trump might have lost. Number three, any words of threats to Mike Pence, which themselves might be actionable as maybe obstruction of justice or something like that. So Pence could be an incredibly valuable witness, even setting aside some of the things that he can't talk about.